Zara Zellman was elbow-deep in a broken espresso machine when her entire weekend, and her life took an unexpected turn. Steam hissed from the side valve as she cursed under her breath, her apron stained with coffee and frustration. The boutique mountain resort café, tucked inside the glitzy Silverpine Lodge in Aspen, was slammed with guests checking in for the winter gala. Of course, the espresso machine chose this exact moment to die. "Hey, careful," came a voice behind her. "You're about to burn your hand." Zara turned, strands of her dark brown hair falling from her messy ponytail. The man standing there had the kind of face that made you blink. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, and eyes a deep, unreadable shade of gray-blue. He wore a black wool coat over a simple sweater, nothing flashy. He looked like any other guest, albeit one who probably drove an expensive car. "I'm fine," she said, trying to keep her tone brisk. "Unless you're a certified espresso technician, I've got this." He raised his hands in surrender. "Didn't mean to intrude, just looked like you could use some help." Zara wiped her hands on a towel and let out a breath. "I could use a second machine that isn't from the Stone Age," he laughed, easy and low. "I'm Ford Ellison," she blinked. "Nice to meet you, Ford." "Sorry, I'm not usually this grumpy. The cafe's short-staffed, my barista called in sick, and half the lodge wants triple-shot lattes." "Then consider me your temporary assistant," he said, stepping behind the counter like he belonged there. "Wait, what?" But he was already rolling up his sleeves and grabbing cups. "Tell me what to do," Zara stared. "You're serious?" "Completely." She hesitated, but something in his expression, calm, steady, made her nod. "Fine, you steam milk, don't burn it. And don't touch the espresso machine unless you want third-degree burns." "Yes, boss." For the next hour they worked side by side. Ford was surprisingly good at taking instructions, surprisingly calm under pressure, and surprisingly fun. He never complained once, even when a guest knocked over an entire tray of cappuccinos. When the rush finally died down, Zara leaned against the counter, exhausted. "You really didn't have to do that." "I didn't mind," he said, handing her a paper cup. "Hot chocolate." "Figured you needed something without caffeine after all that." Zara took it, surprised. "Thanks. So, do you work here full-time?" She nodded. "I run the café. My parents opened it years ago, and when they retired, I took over. We're independent, but we lease the space from the lodge. Ever take a break?" "Not really." "Why?" He gave her a small smile. "Because you look like you haven't had a day off since." "Ever?" She laughed, then caught herself. "What about you? Visiting for the gala?" Ford shrugged. "Sort of. Needed a change of scenery." Something about his voice made her pause. There was a weight behind the words, like he wasn't just another rich guy on a ski weekend. But before she could ask, her phone buzzed with a kitchen delivery alert. She sighed. "Duty calls." He nodded. "Thanks for letting me help," she smiled. "Thanks for saving me." As he turned to leave, she added, "Hey, Ford." He glanced back. "If you're still around tomorrow morning, swing by. I might need backup again." His smile widened just a little. "I'll be here." The next morning, Zara found him waiting outside the café before she even opened the doors. This time he brought fresh croissants from the French bakery down the street. "You're persistent," she said, unlocking the door. "I like being useful." And just like that, it became a thing. Every morning for the next 3 days, he showed up, sometimes with pastries, sometimes with stories about the tourists he ran into, always with that same calm energy that settled her nerves. She barely knew him, yet talking to him felt easy, too easy. "You know," she said on the 4th day as they cleaned up after the breakfast rush, "you never said what you do." He looked over at her, wiping his hands on a towel. "Would it change anything if I did?" Zara tilted her head. "That depends. Please don't say you're a magician or something," he laughed. "No, not a magician." "Okay, so," he hesitated, then said, "I run a company, tech stuff, boring." She gave him a look. "Ford." "That's the most vague answer I've ever heard. You didn't ask for a full resume." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not going to tell me the name of the company, are you?" He shook his head, grinning. "Not yet." Zara rolled her eyes. "Fine. Keep your secrets." But later that evening, while she was restocking supplies in the back, she overheard 2 lodge staff whispering near the service elevator. "Did you see the guest list for the VIP dinner tonight?" one said. Yeah, and guess who's on it? Ford Ellison, as in Ellison Tech. He's the CEO, the guy's worth billions. Zara nearly dropped the box in her hands. Ford, billionaire, CEO, and she'd been talking to him like he was just some nice, helpful guy with good taste. Her heart raced as she backed away from the door. She felt stupid, embarrassed. She'd let her guard down, laughed with him, trusted him, and he hadn't told her the truth. That night, she didn't open the café. She needed air, clarity. Snow fell lightly as she walked the edge of the lodge property, boots crunching in the silence. She was halfway down the path toward the frozen lake when she heard footsteps behind her. "Zara," came a familiar voice. She turned to see Ford walking toward her, no coat, just a sweater and jeans. "You weren't at the café." "No," she said flatly. He stopped a few feet away. "You found out?" "Yep," he exhaled. "I wasn't hiding it to trick you. You lied by omission." "I didn't want to be that guy, the one who walks in and everyone suddenly cares because of a title. With you, I didn't feel like a CEO. I just felt like me." Zara stared at him, emotions crashing together. "You should have told me." "You're right," he said quietly. "I should have." They stood in silence, snow falling gently around them. "You said it wouldn't change anything," she finally said, "but it does. Because now I don't know what was real." Ford stepped closer, voice low. "It was all real, every moment. I didn't expect to walk into a cafe and fall for someone who smelled like cinnamon and yelled at espresso machines. But I did." Zara's breath caught. "I wanted to tell you. I just didn't want to lose this." She looked up at him. "You really fell for me," he nodded, "completely." And despite the confusion, despite the shock, her heart beat faster because she realized she'd fallen too. Zara didn't return to the cafe the next morning. Instead, she drove 10 minutes into town, parked outside a small diner, and sat alone at a booth by the window, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee she didn't have the appetite to finish. The waitress had stopped asking if she wanted anything else. Snow clung to the corners of the window pane, and outside, the mountain was quiet under its fresh white blanket. She pressed her fingers to her temple, trying to make sense of everything. For 4 straight mornings, Ford had shown up like clockwork. He'd made her laugh, listened when she vented about inventory problems and staffing issues, even washed dishes without a second thought. And she'd let herself believe he was just a good man, maybe a little mysterious but genuine. Now she saw the truth. He wasn't just helpful, he was practiced. Comfortable stepping into any space, adjusting to any role, because he'd been trained for it by power, by money, by years of knowing he could control a room without ever raising his voice. She felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. The door to the diner opened, letting in a gust of cold and the jingle of the bell above. Zara didn't look up, but a shadow fell across her table. "I asked the barista next door if she'd seen you," Ford said. "She pointed me here." "I needed space," Zara replied, voice flat. "I know." He didn't sit, just stood there, hands in the pockets of his dark coat, waiting. She finally looked up at him. "I don't understand why someone like you would spend 4 days pretending to be someone else. You could have hired 10 people to fix my machine. You could have bought the whole lodge if you wanted." "I didn't want the lodge," he said. "I wanted time." "For what?" "For a moment where no one cared about who I was. No board meetings, no media, no 20-page NDAs. Just a cup of coffee and a girl who looked me in the eye without calculating what she could get from me." Zara's throat tightened. "You still should have told me." "I didn't lie," he said. "I just didn't volunteer the whole picture. I was afraid the second I did, you'd look at me the way everyone else does." She stared at him. "And how's that? Like I'm a walking dollar sign?" Zara shook her head. "You think I care about your bank account?" "No," he said. "I think you don't." And that scared the hell out of me. She exhaled, the anger beginning to shift into something else. "You made me feel like I could trust you. Now I don't know what's real." He stepped closer. "The way I feel about you is real. I'm not asking you to forget what I didn't say. I'm asking you not to throw away something that felt like the first honest thing I've had in years." Zara looked down at her hands. "I don't want to be part of a game," she whispered. "I've worked too hard to build a life with no strings, no expectations." "I'm not here to pull strings," Ford said. "I just want the chance to know you, no titles, no pressure." She studied him for a long moment before finally standing. "Then prove it." His brows lifted slightly. Tonight, she said, there's a staff appreciation dinner at the community center. It's nothing fancy plastic tablecloths, potluck trays, no tuxedos. Come as you are, be a person, not a CEO. Ford nodded slowly. I'll be there. Zara didn't give herself time to overthink it. She left the diner, drove back to the lodge, and spent the afternoon preparing trays of lemon bars and pasta salad. If he showed, fine. If he didn't, she'd know exactly where she stood. By 7, the event hall was already filling with housekeepers, maintenance workers, shuttle drivers, and seasonal staff. Children darted between tables while music floated from a battered speaker in the corner. Zara wore jeans and a sweater, her hair down for once, loose waves brushing her shoulders. She was standing near the drink table when the door opened and Ford stepped inside. He wore a navy thermal shirt and dark jeans. No designer labels, no entourage, just him. Zara swallowed and walked over. You came, you asked, he said simply. She gestured to the folding chairs. Welcome to the glamorous world of resort staff parties. Watch your step, the floor gets slippery near the punch bowl. Ford glanced around with a smile. I've been to galas in Paris that felt colder than this place. At least here, people are actually smiling. They sat together at a table near the back, sharing paper plates of baked ziti and potato salad. One of the shuttle drivers brought over a deck of cards, and soon they were caught up in a game of spades with a pair of housekeepers who took the rules very seriously. Ford lost every hand. Zara didn't miss the way he laughed at himself, or how he offered to help clean up when one of the little kids spilled juice across the floor. By the end of the night, she found herself forgetting who he was or who the world said he was. He didn't act like someone used to being served. He acted like someone who wanted to belong. When the tables were cleared and most of the guests had left, Ford walked her out to her car. Snow had started falling again, light and slow. Tonight felt like a reset, he said. Zara leaned against the car door. You were decent at spades for a guy who can't count trump cards. I was distracted. By what? He met her gaze. You, she looked away, heart thudding. Zara, he said gently, I meant what I said before. I'm not here to play a role. I don't want to be the CEO right now. I just want to be the man who shows up for you. She hesitated, then said, I don't date people who live 100 lives at once. I can't compete with private jets and conference calls with foreign investors. I don't want you to compete, he said. I want you to be the part of my life that isn't about any of that, the part that's real. Zara stared up at him, unsure of how to answer. Ford reached into his coat and handed her a small, folded piece of paper. This is the café equipment supplier I use for my company kitchens. Their tech team will have a replacement espresso machine on a truck by morning. It's paid for. She opened it, stunned. Why would you? Because I'm not trying to impress you, he said. I'm trying to show you that I care. Zara didn't speak. She couldn't. He stepped back, hands at his sides. If you want me to leave, I will. But if there's even the smallest chance you feel anything close to what I do, I'll wait. With that, he turned and walked into the snow, leaving her standing there, heart pounding, unsure of everything except that nothing in her life had ever felt quite like this. The espresso machine gleamed like a work of art when Zara stepped into the café at dawn. It had arrived just before sunrise, delivered by a white service van with no logo and a driver who barely spoke, only handed over a clipboard and wheeled the equipment inside like he'd done it 1,000 times. The machine was sleek, stainless steel, top of the line. It was the kind of equipment she'd once seen in a trade magazine and immediately flipped past something for bigger shops with corporate backers and endless budgets, not for a girl trying to keep her family's legacy alive one latte at a time. She didn't touch it at first. She just stood there, arms crossed, staring at the thing like it might suddenly disappear. Then her fingers moved on their own, flipping levers and checking the pressure dial. It hummed to life like it had always belonged there. Reckon that machine would have put me out of a job last week, came a voice behind her. Zara turned. Ford leaned against the doorframe, a soft wool beanie pulled low over his forehead. Snow clung to his shoulders. He looked like he'd walked from somewhere far without caring who saw him. You shouldn't be here, she said, keeping her voice even. I told you I'd wait. She wiped her hands on a towel, eyes fixed on the new machine. This must have cost more than my rent for the year. It's a gift. I didn't ask for it. You didn't have to. Zara turned away. That's not how I work, Ford. I don't need someone solving my problems with platinum cards and secret deliveries. I know, that's not why I did it. Then why? He stepped closer, the scent of pine and winter clinging to him. Because I wanted to give you something that made your life a little easier, not to impress you, not to buy anything from you, just because I care. She folded her arms. You think it's that simple? Drop a miracle machine into my lap and I suddenly forget what it's like to be left holding everything when people walk away. He met her gaze. Who walked away? Zara hesitated, jaw tight. My brother. He bailed after our parents retired. Said the café wasn't worth the stress. Said I should sell it and go live a normal life. He doesn't call, doesn't visit. And I stayed. I stayed because this place is mine, because I wanted it to mean something. Ford's voice softened. You made it mean something. You don't get to say that. You met me 5 days ago. That's long enough to see you're stronger than most people I know, and stubborn, apparently. She let out a short, reluctant laugh, then caught herself. That's not the point. No, the point is you've been carrying everything alone for so long, you don't know what it feels like to let someone lighten the load. You wouldn't last a week in this place. Then let me try. Zara studied him. He didn't look away. There was no performance this time, no sly charm or calculated restraint. Just a man standing in her café with snow in his hair and sincerity in his eyes. She exhaled. Fine, you want to help. You're on dish duty, and if you break a single mug, I'm sending you the invoice. Ford grinned. Deal? They worked in silence for a while, the kind of silence that settled between people who didn't need to fill every space with words. The café opened slowly, regulars trickling in, the smell of espresso curling into the air. Ford washed dishes without complaint, his sleeves rolled up and water dripping down his arms. He didn't ask for praise, didn't look for attention. He just worked. At one point, Zara passed behind him with a tray of pastries and paused. You're oddly good at this. Don't sound too surprised, he said without turning. I'm not, just making mental notes in case I need to hire full-time staff. I'll have to check with my other boss, but I think I can make room. She rolled her eyes and walked away, but her lips twitched. Later that afternoon, after the last customer left and the floor had been swept twice, Ford sat at the corner table by the window, sipping something he'd made himself. Zara walked over, towel slung across her shoulder. You're not leaving anytime soon, are you? Depends. You planning to kick me out? She slid into the seat across from him. Still debating, he leaned forward. Then let me make your job harder. How? I'm taking you out tomorrow night, she blinked. Excuse me, you heard me, dinner, not here. Somewhere you don't have to serve anyone or fix anything. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Why? Because I don't fit into your world. Ford's expression didn't change. Then I'll meet you in yours, Zara hesitated. I don't own a dress that costs more than $50. I don't know which fork goes with what. I've never been to a restaurant that takes reservations more than a day in advance. I'm not asking you to change, I'm asking you to say yes. She watched him for a long moment. Her instincts screamed to pull back. But her heart, traitorous, hopeful, stubborn, leaned forward. I'll think about it. I'll take that as a maybe. Don't. But he was already standing, pulling on his coat. You'll say yes. You just need a little time to convince yourself it's not a trap. Zara couldn't help it. She laughed just once. You're infuriating, so I've been told. As he stepped out into the cold, Zara watched him go, her pulse unsteady. Maybe she was crazy. Maybe letting him in was a mistake. But deep down, beneath the fear and the pride and the armor she'd built over years of doing everything herself, there was a spark. Small, dangerous, real. She didn't know where this was going, but for the first time in a long time, she wanted to find out. Zara stood in front of the floor-length mirror in her bedroom, tugging nervously at the hem of her navy-wrap dress. It wasn't new, but it was the nicest thing she owned that didn't come with a coffee stain or the scent of cinnamon. Her fingers fumbled with the silver clasp on her bracelet, not because it was difficult, but because her hands wouldn't stop shaking. When Ford had shown up that morning to confirm their dinner plans, he hadn't said where they were going. Just that he'd take care of everything and pick her up at 6. She'd almost said no again, But something in his eyes, not the intensity from earlier days, but a quiet steadiness, had made it impossible. The clock ticked past 6 when headlights swept across the window. She peeked through the curtains and blinked. A black SUV sat idling outside her small cottage nestled near the edge of town. The man who stepped out wore a charcoal coat and gloves, not a single trace of the billionaire CEO on display. He looked like someone who belonged on her porch, someone who'd knock gently and wait. Zara opened the door before he had the chance. "You're late," she said. Ford held up a small bouquet of winter roses, deep red and soft white petals edged with frost. "I had to stop and argue with a florist who insisted these weren't in season." She took them without a word, her fingers brushing his. She didn't smile, but she didn't close the door either. "Ready?" he asked. "Not entirely." "That's good." "Neither am I." They drove in silence through winding roads, the snowbanks glowing under the street lamps. Zara expected him to head toward the city, or maybe some exclusive restaurant tucked behind wrought iron gates. He turned down a narrow forest road instead. "Are we going somewhere with plumbing?" she asked, watching the trees blur past. "You'll see." 10 minutes later, the road opened into a clearing lit by warm golden light. A rustic timber cabin stood at the center, wrapped in strings of soft amber bulbs. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the scent of pine and something savory drifted through the air. Zara stared. "What is this?" "It's mine," Ford said, pulling into the snowy drive. "Or I guess, technically, the company's. I built it a few years ago. It's where I go when I need to get away." "And you brought me here," he shut off the engine. "I wanted to bring you somewhere that's mine, not a restaurant, not a hotel, just this." When she stepped inside, warmth enveloped her. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, and a table had been set with simple white plates, silverware, and glasses that caught the light like crystal. A meal waited under covered trays. On the sideboard, roasted squash, glazed chicken, something rich and buttery that made her stomach growl. "You cooked." "I hired someone this morning. They left 10 minutes before I picked you up." Zara turned slowly in the room. "You did all this for one dinner?" "No," Ford said, voice quiet. "I did it because I wanted you to know I'm not afraid of showing up. Not just for the good parts." She walked over to the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. "And what happens when this moment ends, when life gets messy again? Then we get messy together." She glanced over her shoulder. "That's a line. It's also the truth." They sat across from each other at the table, the firelight flickering between them. Zara tried not to fidget with her fork. Ford poured sparkling cider into her glass without asking, as if he knew she didn't drink often but still wanted something celebratory. Midway through the meal, she set her fork down. "You could have had anyone." "I still could," he said, "but I don't want anyone." "I want you. You don't even know the half of me." "Then tell me." Zara hesitated. "I'm not polished. I don't know how to be part of your world without feeling like I'm walking into a test I'm not prepared for. I've spent most of my life trying to hold together something small and fragile. I don't know what it's like to have safety nets or backup plans. I can't afford to fall for someone who disappears the moment things stop feeling perfect." Ford leaned forward, his voice firm but controlled. "I'm not disappearing. When I walked into that café, I didn't expect to find someone who made me question everything I thought I wanted. But I did. You don't need to fit into my world. I want to build something that fits both of us." Zara studied him. The fire popped softly behind them. "This isn't just a phase for you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. She froze. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said quickly. "Not yet," she exhaled, shoulders dropping. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver necklace, a tiny coffee bean charm resting at the center. "It's a reminder of where this started, of who you are, and how I never want you to change." Zara reached for it, fingers trembling. "It's beautiful. Let me put it on." She turned, lifting her hair as he fastened the clasp. His fingers brushed the back of her neck, sending a shiver down her spine. When she faced him again, her voice was barely a whisper. "You really mean it?" "I've never been more certain of anything." They stood there, inches apart, the fire casting long shadows across the cabin floor. Zara lifted her hand to his chest. I've spent so long protecting myself, I forgot what it felt like to be seen. Ford touched her cheek, his thumb tracing the edge of her jaw. Then let me learn every part of you, not just the strong parts, all of it. Her lips curved slightly, something soft and fragile blooming in her chest. I think I'm ready. He kissed her, slow and certain, and it felt like the world outside the cabin didn't exist. Later, they sat curled together on the oversized leather couch, a blanket draped over their legs. She leaned into his side, head resting against his shoulder, the necklace catching the firelight with every breath. I don't want this to end, she murmured. It doesn't have to. She looked up at him. What do you mean? I've already started working with my legal team. I want to buy out the cafe's lease from the lodge, then transfer the deed to you, full ownership, no strings, her breath caught. You're serious? You've given everything to that place. It's time someone gave something back. Tears welled in her eyes, uninvited but impossible to fight. I don't know what to say. Just say you'll let me keep showing up. She nodded, unable to speak. Outside, snow continued to fall, silent and unhurried. Inside, a new chapter began not with a grand declaration or a sweeping gesture, but with the quiet certainty of two people choosing each other, completely and without fear. The sky above Aspen was a dusky lilac, the last light of winter's day slipping behind the mountains as Zara stepped out of the cafe and locked the door. A thin veil of snow dusted the sidewalk, crunching beneath her boots as she turned toward the black SUV waiting at the curb. Inside, Ford sat behind the wheel, one hand resting on the steering column, the other holding a thermos she recognized as her own. Borrowed this, he said as she slid into the passenger seat. Hope you made decaf. I've got a board meeting in the morning and I'd like to sleep sometime this week. It's cocoa, she said, pulling off her gloves. With cinnamon, so technically you owe me a thank you. Ford leaned over and kissed her cheek. I owe you a lot more than that. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the kind that had become natural between them, quiet, not empty, comfortable. She glanced at him as the SUV curved along the snowy back road toward the cabin. You didn't need to come tonight, she said. He kept his eyes on the road. I wanted to. She folded her hands in her lap. You've been here every night this week. You say that like it's a problem. Zara turned to the window, hiding a smile. It's not. The cabin came into view, its windows glowing with warm light. She'd been there nearly every evening since that first dinner, each night adding another layer to something that had once felt impossible. They cooked together, played chess badly, read books by the fire, and sometimes they just sat in silence, her head on his chest, the world outside forgotten. Inside, the air was warmer than usual. A fire already burned in the hearth, and a familiar scent vanilla and clove drifted from the kitchen. Ford took her coat and hung it by the door. Stay here for a second, he said, brushing a kiss over her temple. I've got something. Zara raised an eyebrow. If it's another coffee bean necklace, I'm going to start a collection. He disappeared into the hallway and she wandered to the fireplace. A new painting hung above the mantel, her café, sketched in soft charcoal against a snowy backdrop. Her breath caught. When he returned, he was holding a slim leather folder. Before you say anything, he said, just listen. She looked at it but didn't reach for it. What is it? Final paperwork, he said. The café is officially yours, fully. I bought out the lease, cleared the long-term property rights with the lodge, and had it all transferred into your name. No strings, no fine print. Zara stared at him. Ford. I don't want your café, I want you to own it completely, to never have to answer to anyone for it again. You've earned that. She opened the folder slowly, her fingers trembling. Her name was there, her business, no co-owner, no corporate ties, it was hers. I don't even know how to thank you. You don't have to. She set the folder on the table and walked to him. You could have done this weeks ago. I know, but back then I wasn't sure what I meant to you. Now I am. Her eyes searched his. And what do I mean to you? Ford brushed a hand against her jaw, fingers gentle. You're the only thing that makes the rest of it make sense. She didn't answer. Instead, she kissed him soft at first, then deeper, her hands gripping the front of his sweater as if anchoring herself. He responded instantly, pulling her close, the kiss full of everything they hadn't said yet. When they finally broke apart, breathless, she rested her forehead against his. Don't ever disappear on me. I won't, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. The next morning, the town of Aspen buzzed with the annual winter gala preparations. This time, Zara hadn't been invited just to serve coffee. She stood at the entrance of the lodge's grand ballroom in an emerald silk gown. She hadn't chosen Ford had surprised her with it that afternoon. The boutique owner showing up at the café with a hush-hush delivery and a knowing smile. The gown fit like a dream, its open back and flowing skirt unlike anything she'd worn before. Her hair had been swept up by a stylist Ford insisted on sending, though Zara had argued the whole time. Now, as she stared into the glittering room of polished guests and white-gloved servers, she felt wholly out of place. Ford appeared beside her in a midnight black tuxedo, his presence grounding. "You look like you own the room." "I feel like I'm about to trip over my own dignity," he offered his arm. "Then I'll catch you." They walked in together, and for the first time, Zara didn't feel like an outsider. Not because of the dress or the guests who whispered Ford's name in reverence, but because he never let go of her hand. Not once later that night, under crystal chandeliers and the soft hum of a string quartet, he led her onto the dance floor. "I don't dance," she warned. "You didn't run," he said. "That's progress." They swayed slowly, her head resting against his chest. Around them the world sparkled, but it was nothing compared to the warmth building in her chest. "I used to think I had to do everything alone," she murmured. "I know," he replied. "But you don't, not anymore." She looked up at him, her voice barely audible over the music. "I love you." Ford stilled, his hand tightening on her waist. "Say it again." "I love you." His lips curved into something soft, something unguarded. "I've been waiting to hear that since the second you yelled at me about scalded milk." She laughed, the sound honest and unfiltered, and he kissed her in the middle of the dance floor, uncaring who watched. 3 months later, the café reopened with a new name carved above the door: Zellman & Co. The & Co. wasn't for investors, it was for the future. Inside, the new espresso machine purred as Zara served cappuccinos to a full house. Her staff had grown by too, and she finally had time to breathe. Ford sat at his usual table by the window, laptop open, though he hadn't typed anything in half an hour. When she brought him his drink, he looked up and grinned. "You're late." She placed the cup in front of him. "It's free, be grateful." He reached for her hand. "Marry me," Zara blinked. "That's not how this works. You're supposed to ask with, I don't know, flowers or a song or something." He shrugged. "I could buy out the florist again." She narrowed her eyes. "You already proposed once with a necklace." "I didn't ask then, I just promised." Her breath caught. "Now I'm asking." She didn't hesitate. "Yes." He pulled her into a kiss right there in the middle of the café, and the regulars clapped like they'd all been waiting for it, because they had. Zara never stopped working. She still got flour on her apron and argued with vendors. But now she had a partner who made the hard days lighter and the quiet nights warmer. Ford still ran his company, but he made time real time, not just for her but for them. They didn't need the world to understand what they had, they just needed each other, and that was enough. Forever.